If we can take our seats so we can start the morning session. Excellent. Um, I hope everybody got a cup of coffee. And with that said, we are going to now begin the morning session of presentations. Today, our opening speaker is Dr. Nancy Levinson, who is a professor of aeronautics and astronautics, and also a professor of engineering systems at the Massachusetts Institute for Technology, MIT. She is an elected member of the National Academy of Engineering. Professor Levinson conducts research on the topics of system safety, software and system engineering, and human-computer interaction. In 1999, she received the ACM Allen Newell Award for Outstanding Computer Science Research, and in 1995, the AIAA Information Systems Award for developing field software safety and for promoting responsible software and system engineering practices where life and property are at stake. In 2005, she received the ACM SIGSOFT Outstanding Research Award. She has published over 200 research papers and is author of 2 books. Safeware, Systems, Safety, and Computers, published in 1995 by Addison Wesley, and Engineering a Safer World, published in 2012 by MIT Press. She consults extensively in many industries on ways to prevent accidents, and we have the distinct privilege of having her with you today. Dr. Levinson, thank you very much.
How do I change the slides?
They change it.
They'll change, that's what I have to tell them? Okay.
If you just say change the...
Okay, I'll do that. Hi, thank you very much. You've carefully thought out all the angles. You've done it 1,000 times. It comes naturally to you. You know what you're doing. It's what you've been trained to do your whole life. Nothing can possibly go wrong, right? Next. Next. Go back. So I've been doing this for 30 years. I've been working in the field of safety engineering. And so what I want to share with you today is what I've learned about the cause of accidents. They wanted me to give a framing talk, so I'm going to talk about what I've learned about why accidents occur and how to prevent them. Next. So I want to talk about some basic concepts in causality, some common factors in major accidents, how we can apply systems thinking and need to safety. I'm going to talk about safety and security as a control problem. I've been working more in security now, and I think we have a better way of doing security as well as a better way of doing safety, and how to establish appropriate controls to prevent marine accidents. Next. So one of the things we have to understand is you have to consider the system as a whole in order to prevent accidents. We tend to want to focus on one little thing, like the 3 blind men and the elephant. We want to look at one piece of the system or the accident that we're familiar with, but we don't learn enough to do when we do that. Next. So Jerome Leder was a man who actually started this area of aviation safety. He was one of the founders of the FAA in the United States and of the NTSB. And he wrote back in 1968 that system safety covers the total spectrum of risk management. It goes beyond the hardware and associated procedures of engineering. It involves attitudes and motivation of designers and production people, employee management rapport, relationships of industrial associations, human factors, the interests and attitudes of top management. Next. The effects of the legal system, the certification issues, political considerations, resources, and many other non-technical but vital influences on the attainment of a acceptable level of risk control. Next. So I want to start with some common traps in understanding accident causality. Root cause seduction, hindsight bias, narrow views of human error, and the focus on blame. Next. So let's start with root cause seduction. There is no such thing as a root cause of an accident, but people like the idea of a root cause because it gives them a feeling of control. If there's only one or two things that cause the accident, then you feel like you can do something about it. If it's lots of things and lots of things that contributed, then you feel like you have less control. And usually what we do is focus on operator error or technical failures, and we ignore the systemic and management factors in accidents, which leads to a sophisticated game of whack-a-mole. Whack-a-mole is I don't know whether you have it in your countries, but it's an American game that's very, very, that children love because it has a bunch of holes and a mole comes out of randomly out of one of the holes, and the kid hits with a hammer to try and guess where the mole is, and they make lots of noise. You know, kids love banging on things, but it's very hard to predict where the mole is going to come up next. And so in the same way, we fix the symptoms of the problems, but we never fix the process that led to those symptoms. So we simply are always in firefighting mode, having the same accident over and over again. And it's very discouraging to be in this field and see the same exact factors happen continually. Next slide. We usually oversimplify the causes of accidents. Almost always there's operator error, there's flawed management decision-making, flaws in the physical design of the equipment, safety culture problems, regulatory deficiencies. If we just look at the Korean ferry accident, I mean, everybody's been so focused on putting all the crew in jail and blaming the captain, who probably was did not behave in an exemplary fashion, but had really very little to do with the cause of that accident. If we look at this, here we haven't investigated yet, but here are some of the factors that I've heard about so far. First of all, the design of the ferry. They recently added new cabins on the upper deck of the ferry, which may have impaired the ability to recover the balance. Communication problems. They obviously were not communicating well. This was enhanced by mechanical failures, including failures in the communication system itself. It looks like the ship's ballast system didn't work very well. There might have been loose or unsecured cargo. We don't know yet. It may have just been poorly designed. There may have been pilot error. There was an unexpected current. They didn't deploy the lifeboats. Were there enough lifeboats? We don't know. Was it hard to get to them? People said they couldn't get to the lifeboats. They were not apparently untrained in lifeboat procedures. It was clearly a poorly designed system for evacuating the boat. There was loose enforcement and following of the safety regulations in the government. Lax regulatory enforcement, loopholes and safety measures. There are some hints. I think it was actually today or yesterday, the inspectors may have been bribed. There was a lack of training and preparation of the crew. Obviously, they did not know what to do in the case of this accident. If you look at Deepwater Horizon, it's really interesting. The mud boat I looked at the Coast Guard transcripts, and the mud boat was taking the mud off of Deepwater Horizon. And in the morning before that procedure, they all went through and simulated and did a dry run of the procedure. They reviewed all the contingency accidents and what they should do in case something went wrong. And the mud boat behaved superbly. Not only was nobody hurt on the mud boat, but they ended up saving a lot of the people that were jumping off of the platform itself, the Deepwater Horizon platform. In contrast, on Deepwater Horizon, there was no practice, didn't seem to be procedures for contingency actions. Nobody knew what they were doing, and there was a tremendous loss of life. This also seems to be the case in the Korean ferry accident. There was a lack of preparation of the Coast Guard to evacuate a large passenger ship in Korea. In general, there was just a failure to prepare. They didn't respond quickly and efficiently to the crisis, and there was fumbling during the early stages of the rescue operations. Next, and you look at any accident, Fukushima Daiichi, any of the major accidents, you find these exact same factors. So can we fix those things? Sure, they're easy. We know that they're going to happen. We know how to fix them, but we don't. If we did, we'd have a lot fewer accidents. There are 3 levels of analysis when you look at an accident. What happened, the events, for example, an explosion or a ferry capsizing. The second level is who and how, the conditions that led to the events. Bad valve design, operator didn't notice something. But at the next level, which we usually don't get to, there's why, or the systemic factors. For example, production pressures, cost concerns, flaws in the design process, flaws in the reporting process, flaws in the communication, flaws in the training. Why were the safety controls ineffective in preventing the accident? And unless we get to that third level, when we look at accidents and when we prepare for accidents, then we can't do much about preventing them. Next. Blame is the enemy of safety. This focus on blame, I understand in Korea that it's in such a tragedy, people want someone to blame to feel better. But it's not going to help make the system safer. And in fact, if they stop there, they're not going to learn anything. We have to get away from this who to blame. Blame is a legal concept. It's something that we leave for the courts. But in engineering, in preparation for accidents, blame doesn't help. Next. There's this other thing you always see about the operators causing an accident. And there are all these statements, 90%, 80% of aircraft accidents are caused by the pilots. And we always hear these same statistics. And the question is that true? Next. Well, the traditional view of operator error is that human error causes accidents and incidents. You always see before they've even recovered the black box in a plane accident, there's this big headline, human error. Well, what else is there? The designers were humans, the regulators were humans. There's only act of God beyond human error. So this doesn't help us very much. What they really mean is operator error, because you want to blame the person at the lowest level of responsibility. So what do? If it's operator error, get rid of the human that did it, the operator. Fire them, retrain them, or do something about humans in general. Just get rid of them by putting in more automation, or rigidify their work by giving them more procedures that they probably won't follow, and for very good reasons. Next. Fumbling for his recline button, Ted unwittingly instigates a disaster. All human behavior is affected by the context in which it occurs. Next. So a systems view of human error and operator error says that human error is a symptom, never a cause. All behavior is affected by the context in which it occurs, so to do something about it, we have to look at the system in which humans operate. What we end up is designing systems where operator error is inevitable, and then we blame it on them. We don't blame it on the design of the system and the pressures under which we put people in the decision-making context. I believe that human error is a symptom of a system that needs to be redesigned. We can't redesign humans. We're stuck with humans the way they are designed. We need to redesign the systems to help the humans make the right decisions and do the right thing. Next. There's also something called hindsight bias. Before the accident, everything's very mixed up. Information is coming in different times. Nobody really knows what's happening. Then the accident occurs, and after the fact, it's easy to see what was right and what was wrong. At the time, it was probably impossible. And so you see in accident reports, the operator should have, they could have, if they would have only. But that's hindsight bias. We only see that after the fact. Next. So what are some of the common factors? So let's take some of these ideas and look at what are the common factors in major accidents. Well, almost always there's a lack of real commitment to safety by the leaders of the organization. There's a widespread belief that accidents are the price of production in a lot of industries. They don't see the long-term impact of accidents on the bottom line. They don't see that safety actually pays. So there's lots of sloganeering. There's all these slogans, oh, safety is a most important thing to us, and their behavior is totally different. In fact, there have been factor analyses of safe organizations, organizations that have few accidents and ones that have lots of accidents. And they looked at all the factors. And the number one factor by far was commitment of management and of leaders to safety, real commitment. There are also often flaws in the safety culture. I'm going to talk a little bit more about this later, but culture is the shared values and norms on which decisions are based. Next. Some of the common types of flawed safety cultures, and the most common is a culture of denial. This is common in industries that have lots of accidents, not in the ones that don't. In these industries, risk assessment is unrealistic. After the Tesoro refinery explosion up in Washington State, the head of the American Petroleum Institute said, our industry is just more risky. We're dealing with chemicals. You're dealing with oceans and things that are risky. And then after Deepwater Horizon, the same man said, this industry is just more risky. Well, I can assure you that being in a metal tube 30,000 feet in the air with just 2 engines keeping you up there is not a real safe activity. Neither is being in a nuclear submarine a mile below the surface with a nuclear reactor there and very little escape mechanisms. But those 2 industries have astoundingly good safety records. In fact, since the 1963, when the U.S. Nuclear Navy created their new the SubSafe program, they have not lost a single submarine in now close to 51 years. Before that, they used to lose one every 2 to 3 years. It's possible to make things very safe, but you have to be committed to it. You have to be willing to make the right decisions. In this culture denial, credible risks and warnings are dismissed. They only want to hear good news, so that's what they hear. People tell them safety is improving. right before Deepwater Horizon, about 3 months before in January, I was paid by BP to teach them a class on system safety. And I went in there and taught them a class, and I have never in my 30 years had such rude people. They basically told me to my face, we don't need what you're telling us. I mean, they were paying me. They asked me. We said, we don't need what you're telling us. Safety's improving. We know what we're doing. That was 3 months before Deepwater Horizon. I walked away and said, I'm through with BP. I'm having nothing more to do with them. And it was clear that they were wrong. But they had a tremendous culture of denial. In their culture denial, accidents are thought of as inevitable, the price of productivity. So, for example, Dudley, who was the chairman of the BP America at the time of the accident, said, well, you know, these things happen. It's like stepping off a curb and being hit by a car. But a better analogy would be running off a curb without looking while you're texting and listening to your iPod. I mean, if you're totally negligent about what you do, yes, accidents become inevitable. But they are not inevitable because in other industries, for example, none of us feels very afraid when we get on an airplane, and most of us get on airplanes all the time. Another type of flawed safety culture is a compliance culture. The focus is on complying with government regulations. They produce extensive safety case arguments about why the thing is safe, have nothing to do with the reality, and it's this game that they play with the regulatory agencies, and then accidents inevitably result. Another type of problem is a paperwork culture. They produce lots of paper analyses with almost no impact on design and operations of the systems. Next. So, other common major factors: inadequate hazard analysis and design for safety. They focus on recovery after adverse events instead of designing safety into the system beforehand. Recovery is hard. We need to do recovery, but we try and put major effort into preventing things from happening. Flawed communication and problem reporting systems. Management of change procedures. There was a change in the ferry design. I have a feeling nobody went back and redid the safety analysis. In fact, historically, most accidents occur after a change is made in the system. So we need to control changes. There's a focus on changing humans rather than changing the system in which humans work. And there's inadequate causal analysis of incidents or accidents and learning from them. Incidents and accidents are a tragedy, especially accidents. We don't want them. But if we don't learn from them, then it's a bigger tragedy because we're only ensuring that something else will happen in the future. Next. So one additional misconception, I keep hearing this term, high consequence, low probability accidents. It's used a lot, or low probability events. These accidents, that is a misconception, and I think they're trying to convince themselves that there is a low probability by calling it that. Major losses occur because organizations are operating under conditions of high risk. If they do that, wasn't a matter of if, but only when. The way that BP was operating their offshore rigs, which I tried to tell them, but they didn't want to hear, meant that an accident was inevitable. Did I know it would happen in April? Absolutely not. Was I pretty sure it was going to happen within the next year or two? I was pretty sure it was going to happen. It was obvious, to me at least. Complex systems migrate towards states of high risk. Accidents take a while to happen. Things change. There's no accident, so they say, oh, it was safe. We can make more changes. And we readjust our estimates of the likelihood of an accident over time when an accident doesn't occur. The risk has not changed. This is just a psychological thing. To prevent accidents, we need to keep people from readjusting those risks downward, to keep them aware of the risks that actually exist at that time. Next. So it's only a random failure. It'll never happen again. Accidents are not random. Accidents are a symptom of something that you have done, people have done wrong. And we can fix that. And industries that don't have accidents demonstrate that it can be fixed. Next. So a system view of safety. When you take systems thinking, which is the way I approach safety, I think of safety as a control problem, not a failure problem. Accidents occur when the system design does not enforce constraints on safe behavior. The O-ring didn't control the release of propellant gas in the Space Shuttle Challenger. The public health system didn't adequately control the contamination of eggs with salmonella in a recent accident in the United States. In our recent financial crisis, the financial system didn't adequately control the use of financial instruments. The Deepwater Horizon design didn't adequately control the high-pressure gas in the well. So we can think of this as a control problem. Next. So then the solution is to stop trying to emphasize preventing failures, but instead to enforce safety constraints on system design. It's a much broader kind of concept. Next. This is what I mean by a safety control structure. I know it's very small, but down in the lower right, there's an operating process. Here's the actual physical process. Here's maybe some human controllers. But above that, we have a whole control structure: operations management, company management, government regulatory agencies, industry associations, unions, the courts, insurance companies, above that, government. And each of these has control actions going down. For example, regulations, standards, certification maybe come from these quasi-governmental agencies, and there's feedback going back. Over on this side is government, is system development and system design.
If I may, also, would you see when you get up?
Oh.
Interpreters miss that for our Spanish speaking, but we have a microphone there.
Okay, sorry.
Right there.
Well,
So
they can look at it. I'm not going to get up again. I promise. I won't get up. Next. So what we need to do then is to build a control structure that's effective. And that includes not just the physical design, but the governmental design, the regulations, the whole safety control structure. And what's interesting is we've discovered that this new systems approach to safety, which has been very effective and is used in aerospace, in aviation, and in the successful industries, is that you can treat security this way too. Safety tries to prevent losses due to unintentional actions by benevolent actors. In security, we're preventing losses due to intentional actions by malevolent actors. The key difference is intent, but there's a common goal, which is loss prevention. And so we focus on, unfortunately, we start to bottom up on both of them. And in security, what we do is we focus, for example, on keeping people out of the network. But that's not the real goal. The goal is to maintain the services and the functions that the network helps us provide. It doesn't really matter if people get into the network if they can't do any harm. And so it's possible to create an integrated top-down system engineering approach to safety and security. And we've been trying this on a lot of systems. The safety now is used all over the world. The security is very new. It's only about 3 months old, but it's been evaluated and is about to be adopted by the U.S. Defense Department because it was so successful in the evaluations. Next. So what we do if we want to control safety or security is design an effective control structure that eliminates or reduces bad events. In the control structure, we need a clear definition of what is the responsibility of everyone in that. The controls may be physical design, it may be processes, or they may be social controls, cultural, policy. Individual self-interest is probably one of the most effective. If you design your system right, it should be in the best interest of individuals to do the right thing, not to do the wrong thing. Next. So this is just a cartoon to show that we can design, we need to design safety into the system, not try and protect after the accident and focus only on that. Next. So what are some components of an effective safety management system? Well, one is leadership and commitment. That I talked about, a strong safety culture, hazard analysis, designed for safety both in the physical system and in the social system and controls. We need good reporting systems and communication. We need a focus on the system in which humans work, not changing humans. Next. We need to worry about management of change. Since most accidents occur after a change, we need to manage those changes, both planned changes and unplanned changes. And we need feedback and continual improvement in learning. We need to analyze accidents in depth and understanding, not just looking for a root cause, which then usually turns out to be someone who can't be sued. But instead, we need to understand all the factors that contribute. We need to look at why the safety control structure was ineffective in preventing the loss and then fix that safety and control structure, improve it. So next, I want to talk about just one thing and then I'll move through, but one aspect of this, but I want to say a little bit more about safety culture because safety culture is so critical. Now, people use different definitions for this. The one I like is by Edgar Schein, who is the father of organizational culture. And he defined culture as the values and deep cultural assumptions under which people make decisions. From those, we create organizational rules, values, practices, and above that, we create artifacts. But safety culture is really those values and deep assumptions. And that is set by the leaders who establish the values under which decisions will be made. Next. So it's a subset of, safety culture is a subset of the general culture. Trying to change culture without changing the environment in which it's embedded is doomed to failing, and simply changing organizational structures. So you put in some new policies, you put in some new standards. It may reduce risk for a short time, but it's not going to work over the long run unless you change the values and cultural assumptions in your industry, in your organization. Next. So changing culture requires passionate and effective leadership. The tone is set at the top of the organization. You need to have the top people setting priorities, assigning resources, designating high-ranking leaders, and we need to minimize blame. This is something called, which I talked about before, there's a whole movement called the Just Culture movement. It actually started in commercial aviation. We found that if we blamed pilots, they stopped reporting problems, if we blamed them for it. And we found if the airlines fought this at first, they said, what do you mean, we're going to let the pilots say they made a mistake and then we won't punish them for it? And we said, yes. Do you want to learn about the mistake before it leads to an accident? And what we find is usually lots of people are making the same mistake. All the pilots are making the same mistake because there's a flaw in the design of the system, but we never hear about it until the accident occurs. So, are you, do you want retribution? Is that more important to you? Or do you want safety? Next. So let me give you an example here. Paul O'Neill was the former Secretary of the Treasury in the United States. But before that, he was named president of Alcoa Corporation, a very large steel company. And he was named that in I believe it's 1987, around there. And he had a meeting immediately of all the investors and the other people in the company, and he announced, I intend to make Alcoa the safest company in America. I intend to go for zero industries. Well, everybody had a fit. You know, they started saying, the board has put this crazy hippie in charge of Alcoa. He's going to kill the company because he's going to focus on safety and not profits. And in fact, all the stock analysts started telling everyone, sell your stock, Alcoa is doomed. Next. In fact, within a year of that speech, Alcoa's profits hit a record high, and they continued that way until he retired in the year 2000, 13 years later. And all that growth occurred while Alcoa became one of the safest companies in the world. And what he understood was that safety and productivity are not conflicting if you do them right. In fact, productivity improves if you build safety in right. The problem is people do safety stupidly, and then they may kill productivity. It doesn't need to happen. In fact, we find people save money and increase productivity when they do design for safety correctly. Next. So I want to finish with a quote by Bertrand Russell. A life without adventure is likely to be unsatisfying, but a life in which adventure is allowed to take whatever form it will is likely to be short. Next. So I just want to tell you, if you're interested, and it wasn't a time to talk about all the details of this, but if you're interested, I do have a book. I actually have given back the royalties, so I'm not trying to sell this to make money. Engineering a Safer World, in which I explain and talk about the systems approach to safety and how we can build safety into systems and design systems to really prevent accidents. And with that, I'll finish.
Well, thank you very much, Doctor. Before moving on, I would like to open up the floor to questions or clarifications or elaborations that you would care Dr. Levinson to go on. Floor is open for questions.
I actually have one, Jorge, if I could.
Yes. Then we'll have the captain there from Mexico, Carlene over there, and then there was a third hand up over here. Please, Chip.
Nancy, first of all, I spent 30 years in the nuclear submarine Navy, and so.
Oh, you do, so you know the subsect.
So I am very familiar with the program, but one of the things that I thought was interesting is we came from a culture where self-reporting was expected.
Yes.
And so what ended up happening is you would go through, you would analyze the event, and we did find root causes. So I found your discussion interesting because we always went for root causes, and we tried to break it down into a specific area that made sense. And we had them broken down into procedures, engineering or design, personnel, and then we broke personnel down even further. We talked about communications, we talked about training, we talked about level of knowledge in terms of being able to understand it, we talked about supervision or management and whether it was available, and we talked about fatigue to see if it applied. And then when we wrote the incident report or the near miss, the expectation was the senior person that managed all of the nuclear propulsion plants in the entire Navy expected you to write a report. And once he got the report, every single office in his headquarters had to go take a look at it to evaluate, one, was the root cause correctly, and was there anything that they were directly responsible for that could be fixed, and did they agree with the analysis that we made? And then we shared it with everybody. And so what I thought was interesting in the fact that you didn't talk about it was that the root causes, and from my perspective, they are important, because without drilling down into the root causes, you can't get to the causal analysis, because a root cause requires several things. It requires you to identify short-term, intermediate, or midterm, and long-term corrective actions. If you don't know what the root cause, it's difficult to get to that. I'd like to get your comment on why you say root cause is sort of
Okay, the problem is if you do causal analysis correctly, and I know the nuclear Navy very well, subsafe program, they do it correctly. You look at all the causes. But too often a root cause is an excuse to find something, and it's something that you can fix easily. And it's usually a human that you, like the captain, put the captain of the ferry in jail. Fire the operator. And then you're done. So it depends on what you mean. So most root causal analysis is done wrong, but if it's done right, I'm not suggesting we don't look at the causes. I want to make sure we look at all of the causes. Now, one of the things in this book, I have a whole chapter on subsafe and why it's so effective. It is a spectacularly well-designed program. There's very little written about it, actually. I've worked...
Except in the Navy.
Except in the Navy, but publicly available. Yeah. There's almost nothing available. I had worked with it a long time, but the chapter I had, Admiral Walt Cantrell, I don't know whether you know him. I know him well. Oh, okay. He's wonderful. And he reviewed it, make sure, because he helped create the program. And Al Ford, who was head of the program at the time, reviewed it to make sure that I have it right. So this is one of the few places that the subsafe program is actually described in great detail and correctly. Most people say, I have this solution here, and subsafe does it. Subsafe doesn't do it, but nobody knows, and therefore you should do it. That's not very helpful.
Thank you very much. Next, Captain from the Inter-American Defense Board. I would ask the participants that have an intervention to please introduce themselves to us so we know who they are and what institution they are here representing. Thank you.
Buenos días, Capitán Javier Antunes, Junta Interamericana de Defensa. Doctora, en su opinión, ¿es la automatización, perdón, sorry, I will wait for the translation. You ready?
Yeah.
En su opinión, I think it's not working. Well, I will try to make my question in English, but it can lead us to a safety problem. Well, it's in your opinion, taking the example of the accident of the Air France plane that went from Brazil to Europe about 3 years ago, that the problem was a failure in the, I think, the speed velocity indication, and the situation of the unfortunate situation of the Malaysian airplane. One was due to the failure in an automated system. It appears that the Malaysian plane was due to a human intention. Is automatization the next step for safety industries? I mean, it's trying to avoid errors by using automatization.
Well, you know, there are always humans involved. Oh, there are always humans involved. The people who design the computers are humans, and we've actually found they make the same mistakes as the operators do. Surprisingly, they forget the same cases. We've done an analysis of Air France. Air France was blamed on the pilot doing an outrageously silly thing, like pulling up in a stall. When you're in a stall, you want to put your nose down because that increases your speed. If you put your nose up, that slows you down more. So every pilot is taught this, and so they ended up saying, well, stupid pilots, we'll just have to reinforce this in training. That wasn't the cause of this accident. These pilots, there were so many factors involved as to why, because my first answer is these were all well-trained, highly experienced pilots. There was no way that they were stupid enough to do that. So there has to be a reason why they did the wrong thing. And it's too complicated to go into right now. But there are lots of reasons, some of which related to the design of the automation, which confused them because the automation failed and was giving bad information to the pilots. That's part of the answer for that. I already forgot what so. Yeah, so automation isn't the cure-all, and it isn't evil. We are going to automate these systems. We're going to do it. Ships are now highly automated, and some types of human errors are eliminated by the automation, for sure. Other types of human errors are created by the automation. So whether it's in the end, it's a win either way, I don't know. It depends on how it's done. If it's done well, then you've improved safety. If it's done poorly, like most of the time, the way it's done, then it may not improve safety at all.
Thank you.
Carlene, please.
Carlene Leidenclus with the North American Marine Environment Protection Association, now MEPA. And Nancy, thank you very much for your presentation. I was a little confused, however, and I was hoping you could expand a bit on your concerns regarding compliance, and I do understand your concerns about paperwork, a compliance culture, because the public invests in the government to develop the regulations which govern businesses, and it's the industries, in our case shipping and ports, responsibility to comply with those regulations. And then, of course, there's an enforcement mechanism, which in our case is the Coast Guard. And all of this does result in an abundance of paperwork. But again, you're going back to, the chain of responsibility. I can understand where complacency could be a concern, but I'm struggling to understand why compliance is a concern if, indeed, the public is invested in the government and the government does the regulations and its industry's responsibility to comply.
I'm not suggesting that we get rid of government regulation. I think government regulatory agencies are extremely important. But they cannot sit there and watch every move that someone makes. Mm-hmm. You're limited in what you can do. You can have them write plans. Do they follow the plans? Well, then you can come in and try and audit them, that they follow the plans. Were you sitting there 24 hours a day, every day, watching them? Or do you go in and audit once every 6 months? The problem is that people think if the culture is, I'm safe as long as I comply. There's medical devices right now. I'm up in arms about medical devices. Medical devices in the U.S. kill tens of thousands of people a year. It's an astounding number. Does the FAA regulate them? Of course they do. But the regulations are so out of date. They use
the FAA?
The FDA.
FDA. Okay, thank you.
So in the FDA, they require the medical devices to do something called a FMEA. And it doesn't work. It's not useful as soon as we put software into these. We all created this old stuff, many of it, before we ever got computers. And so people, and I tell them, but look, what you're doing isn't preventing the accidents. You need to do this other more sophisticated analysis. And their answer is, this is all the FDA requires me to do. That's all I'm going to do. All right? Then they say, change the regulations. Well, that takes 10 to 20 years. By that time, the new stuff now will be obsolete. I'm not suggesting, again, I think that regulatory agencies are absolutely required. After Deepwater Horizon, I helped write the presidential report, and I also was an advisor to the Department of the Interior and the changes they made. But there is just a limit to how much any regulatory agency can have impact on safety. It has to be in the organizations. If the organizations only say, I'm only going to follow the rules that you gave me and nothing else, that's not my problem. Look, they gave me the rules, I followed them, I'm legally off the hook, then you're going to have accidents. And the same thing with paperwork. In some agencies, there's an astounding, I'm not against paperwork either, but it becomes purely filling out a lot of forms. And they deliver to the FAA stacks of a whole truckload of paper. Nobody can look at it. Nobody knows whether it's correct or not. What good does this do? So regulation has to be smart regulation, and it has to be combined with the industry and the organizations believing in safety. And sometimes they say in the DO and the Department of Interior with the offshore oil drilling, they said, how do we change the safety culture in this industry? And I hate to tell you, the government can't change the safety culture of an industry. The leaders of the organizations have to. My next book is going to be why management should care about safety and why it's important for them why they will actually make more money, like the Paul O'Neill story. And we have lots of stories like that, if they care about it. But we have to change the companies. The ones that comply and just only comply have lots of accidents.
Have you ever looked at the impact of publicly traded companies with their requirement for quarterly reporting and the impact on safety?
No.
That might be your third book.
Yeah, maybe. I think that that regulated companies aren't necessarily safer. I think that's one of the things. Again, it comes to the culture in the organization, and in the industry. I mean, the problem that I talked about with BP is really a general problem in the oil and gas industry. It's just the whole industry has this. I talked about how the head of the American Petroleum Institute made these statements. It's a problem in the industry. I don't know how to change that industry unless they have. One of the things that was most effective after Deepwater Horizon, the best thing that happened, I think, was Obama put a moratorium on drilling in the Gulf. Now, what that did was, it hurt BP, but it hurt all of the oil companies. And they got furious with BP. And some of them do a very good job. It's not all oil companies that are bad guys. Some of them have very few accidents and really do a good job. And those people put pressure on BP. In fact, they started suing BP because of this moratorium. And Obama refused to let the moratorium off. He kept it as long as he politically could so that they could put pressure. And now the whole industry has gotten together and they created this institute to watch themselves. The same thing has happened in the nuclear power after 3 Mile Island. The industry got together. It wasn't the government that changed the problem. The industry said, we're out of business if we have another major nuclear accident in this country. They just won't let us build any more nuclear power plants, which is what they did. So the industry got together, they created an industry association. They audit each other's plants. None of this gets out to the government. None of it's public. They're very careful, doesn't get to the insurance company, but they help each other. That's a terrific safety culture.
Thank you. Thank you, Doctor, and thank you, Carlene. We're going to have to end this panel now so that we can you shut that off for me, please? That one. Thank you. We're going to have to end this so that we can keep up with the schedule. Again, thank you. I think she's indeed has set the scene for the workings of this workshop. Safety, culture, attitudes, and motivation, the human factor involved, accountability. I understand what you say about the root cause, and if I understood anything, a root cause itself is the result of underlying systemic failures. So that is the lesson, or one of the lessons to be learned here, in addition to the compliance. And I would add that the culture in which we develop ourselves is also a factor. And we can go on into discussing that how the same set of policies, regulations, and guidelines are followed differently by different countries. The same set, because the country's culture and how you interact with authority also comes into play. But anyway, with that, Doctor, thank you very, very much for a lovely introduction. And with that, I'd like to also bid farewell to Chip, who has to leave. Thank you very much for being here. And we will now invite Dr. Robert Ford up to the panel. Thank you, Bob, very much. Let me introduce our next speaker.
Mr. Moderator, before you do,
Yes, sir.
the professor was fantastic. I wonder if we can get a copy of her presentation.
Oh, yeah, I have to take the cartoons out because they're copyrighted, and Gary Larson, who's my favorite cartoonist, has lawyers. But I'll take that out. You're welcome, though.
Again, good morning. Well, Captain Robert Ford is the acting director of the Office of Security in the Office of Environment and Compliance at the U.S. Maritime Administration, and he has over 35 years of experience in the maritime industry as a ship's officer, consultant, MISPS auditor, and maritime accident investigator. From 1977 to 1999, Bob sailed on American flag cargo ships, including service, commercial, and military contracted vessels. He sailed in all licensed deck officer positions from third mate to master. After retiring from the sea, Bob went to the National Imagery and Mapping Agency, present-day National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, as a marine analyst in the Notice to Mariners Division. In 2001, Bob moved from NEMA to the National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, and was the investigator in charge for a number of high-profile marine accidents, including an allusion to Andrew J. Barbieri, Staten Island Ferry, and boiler rupture of the Norwegian cruise line vessel Norway. He served as ICC project manager or group chairman for a number of accidents to small passenger vessels. And after leaving NTSB, Bob went to the Liberian International Ship and Corporate Registry. His responsibilities included scheduling a quality review of safety, ISM, and security ISPS audits. He's a certified ISM and ISPS security auditor and coordinated the training of Liberian auditors. While at the Liberian Register, he investigated a number of accidents, including the sinking of a cruise ship Explorer in the Antarctic. Bob is a 1977 graduate of the United States Merchant Marine Academy. Bob?
Thank you, sir. And good morning. Buenos dias. I'd like to make this a little interactive so that if I'm moving too quickly and you have a question, just say, hey, Bob, stop, and just ask the question. I think the microphone is available, so like I said, please ask your questions. I have the title, A History of Marine Accidents, and this is not going to be strictly a history lesson. There's a point of where I want to end up. But just for a little bit of knowledge, that's the Women's Titanic Memorial in Washington Channel, Washington, D.C. Next. Before I go too far, I don't want to get into the presentation in case there's anyone here that is not familiar with the International Maritime Organization. It's a UN, United Nations specialized agency responsible for safety, security, and prevention of marine pollution. It was established by convention in 1948. It creates a regulatory framework for international vessels, and it promotes cooperation amongst nations. It's headquartered in London, and that statue on the left is the Seafarers Memorial. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Everyone is familiar with the Titanic. What happened? It hit an iceberg. There weren't enough lifeboats. Over 1,500 people died. Everyone's seen Hollywood movies. Next. But what came out of the Titanic? SOLAS, the Safety of Life at Sea Convention. A number of ships had already hit icebergs throughout the years, but the Titanic really got the international community's attention. And they met within a year to form SOLAS and back please, and the International Ice Patrol, which patrols off the Grand Banks of Newfoundland, and it's run by the United States Coast Guard. Next. This one's well known by all U.S. mariners. It's called the Marine Electric. Next. It sank off the coast of Virginia. It was a 350-mile trip from Norfolk, Virginia to Somerset, Massachusetts, right along the coast. So you say, what can go wrong? Nope. The hatches, that's all right, you can hold that. Hatches gave way, ship flooded. 31 out of 34 on board died. 3 of them that lived were in very cold water for 90 minutes. As a result of this accident, the Coast Guard formed well-known U.S. Coast Guard Rescue Swimmer Program. Next. And just as important to merchant seamen, in waters above 30 north and 30 south, exposure suits have to be carried on U.S. flag vessels, and now they're required by the IMO internationally. Okay, next. Question?
Yes. Are you saying that all the cruise vessels that go down to the South Pole and up north have to have those suits?
Not for passengers, no.
No for passengers?
No. Well, okay. So we're, okay. Herald of Free Enterprise. Just a second. Okay. So it was a ro-ro passenger ferry, 70 miles between Zeebrugge and Dover, Belgium and Dover. Once again, what can go wrong? It departed the harbor with the door open, a miscommunication between the bosun and another seafarer. It was calm weather. It just basically took in water through the door bow, which hadn't been closed, and 193 fatalities. Next. As a result of this, and not just this, there had been very many high-profile accidents in the 80s. The International Safety Management Code. You can put the next one up. Okay, hold that. And out of the ISM code, you have ships on international voyages are required to have a safety management system. Here's a copy of the ISM code. It's not that thick. But one of the things it did, as you can see, it established a designated person. And before the ISM code was enacted, there was no link back into the company office. Now, because of this code, there is a man responsible in the company up to the highest levels of management. Yes, sir.
Is that the designated person ashore?
Yes, he is. Yes. It also outlines the responsibilities of the master, and it is a formal certification program that you must have a document of compliance, and they must be audited. Any questions on the ISM code?
Just one. How then could the seawall happen?
There's a lot of accidents that are still happening.
No, I know, but clearly ISM code wasn't being implemented, enforced, observed. And I just don't understand. I'm being asked, you know,
okay,
how it happened.
Okay,
Not the core, not the reasons, but the lack of ISM in that situation.
one of the things I was going to get to near the end, but I have no problem addressing it now, is you have a high-profile marine accident. And what happens is the media comes out and starts putting out reports, accurate or not accurate. You have maritime experts around the world coming out with their opinions of why it happened. Due to my 5 years at the National Transportation Safety Board of the United States, I learned, wait until the investigation comes out. We're here, the captain's been arrested, I hear all the mates have been arrested, we're hearing they were sent back to their rooms. I can tell you, with all due respect to the media, if there's any here, if the media can't get information, they'll make something up. So until the final report comes out, I would not really comment on it. I know that's not the answer you're looking for, but for now, that's the best I can do on that particular accident. Next one. This is another one that had a great deal of impact on U.S. seamen. The Exxon Valdez, estimated between 11 million and 20 million gallons of oil. You can see the area of Valdez. Next. And that entire area that was polluted. There were major changes for ships coming into the United States. Next. You can see the pollution here. It was very high profile. The vice president's wife at the time said, all this by a drunken sailor. So to go back to your question, when you have these accidents, and as Nancy made a great point, you start looking to blame. It is very consistent. Everyone wants a head on a platter, to use an American expression. Next. Yes, sir.
But it seems like basically you're less than 5 minutes into your presentation, but all they're doing is playing catch up. Something happens, somebody go and write rules, and it happens again. You know, to me, that's part of the business cycle. People want to make money, so these things have to happen.
There's another expression we have, and it's an unfortunate one, and that regulations are written in blood. And you're right, it is catch up. I was an investigator in charge for the explosion on the Norway. 11 crew members, foreign third world seamen, were killed. It happened in Miami. There was very little interest. After one day, all the cameras were gone. If it had been 11 American passengers, believe me, there would have been a lot more attention, and that's what gets people, international bodies and lawmakers' attention. But I hear your point, absolutely. I mean, maritime industry's been around a long time, and you do see some of the same things happen. I had one slide that I was going to put up, and it was in 1904. It was called the General Slocum, and it caught on fire in the East River. Hundreds of German immigrants burned up or drowned. And so many of the lessons that they came out of what the crew members did wrong in fighting the fire. I investigated an accident in New York in 2001. The crew members made the same mistakes, opening doors. As they leave, as they're running away, they don't close the door, don't secure ventilation. So yes, I hear what you're saying. So anyway, the Exxon Valdez, any ship coming to the U.S. has to have double hull. We were the ones that started that, United States. And you can put the next. It increased liability to companies. It lowered the blood alcohol content to merchant seamen to 0.04. So if the Coast Guard walked on a ship in port and they smell alcohol on your breath, they're gonna give you the test. They also required ships to start carrying the meters. So there were a great deal of changes with the Valdez. There was zero tolerance after the Valdez for crew members that had been logged by the master for drinking. Before that, they'd get a slap on the wrist, rarely even a suspension, but it all changed after the Valdez. Yes? Thank you.
That's the same old, same old. The crew members drinking probably had very little to do with this accident. They had a requirement for double holes. Nobody enforced it. They had promised that they would have them. They never did. The companies, when the government opened up this thing, the Coast Guard had gotten rid of their radar out to this place. The reason that they were by the reef is because they didn't have iceberg detection equipment, and there were icebergs reported in the shipping lanes. You know, there were all these things. The fact that this is what we do. We say, oh, well, some of the crew members were drunk. They had nothing to do with the lack of equipment on this ship and all these other factors. And so we focus on blaming some human and forget that we have to change the system.
Well, I didn't say anything about the captain being intoxicated, and I absolutely agree the third mate should have been able to navigate that ship clear of that rock. We hear all sorts of rumors. It's a small industry, we know. I can't verify any of it, but when you look at this second part, enhancing federal responsibility, potential liabilities, what they have done is you have a spill, you can go to jail for it. The companies are paying enormous fines. And so is this the way to approach it? I don't know. But all I can tell you is you can look at statistics pre-Exxon Valdez and up to today and see how much it has reduced. Is it still happening? Yes, it is. But still, this is what, unfortunately, is another situation that gets people attention. Fear of jail and then paying incredible fines.
Bob, I think that we'll see a trend in Bob's presentation, but please be aware that the presentation itself is called Accidents and Lessons Learned. So based upon the title of that, we'll see a lot of this, and evidently we're playing the catch-up game simply because we're not clairvoyant. And in the safety industries, as in most industries, you cannot foresee what's going to happen until it happens. So playing the catch-up game is part of the game. In fact, that's how the game is played. Because if you have any instances of people predicting what's going to happen and then planning for it, we would all love to know about those. So the catch-up game is the natural way this game is played. You can't plan for unforeseen contingencies, and we learn from the lesson from the accidents themselves. Now we could learn better, more policies could be enacted. A lot of it, as I said before, is also your own culture and how the countries or regions sometimes sort of develop and move themselves within compliance, within figures to authority. So there's a lot of aspects here, but again, while I see that the root cause is, as I understood it, itself a symptom of something else, it is very, very difficult, if not impossible, to plan major policies and regulations and stuff that hasn't happened.
Thank you for that. Yes, I was not trying to give a investigation or a recap of all that happened during the investigation. It would be just too time-consuming, and within 45 minutes, as I've said, when I get to near the end, then I hope you'll understand the method to my madness of when I get there. Okay, so next we're on the MV Estonia. Another well-known case, and this was 852 people died, and this was a bow door, the lower left that you can see just broke off, and this was another short voyage, 170 miles, going to Dover. This is the one, Belgium. I was incorrect in the other one. Stockholm. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm getting them backwards now. Yes, it went from Tallinn, Estonia, to Stockholm, Sweden, 170 miles. And there was, once again, another very quick reaction by the international community, specifically the IMO, if you can. And once again, they looked at the safety culture in and around passenger ships, strengthening and securing, which is going to be a technical fix, surveys and inspections of ships, navigational guidance, and recommendations on decision support system for masters on vessels. And another one which came out is crowd control management training, because they did not control the crowd too well, and that, not to go back to the one in Republic of Korea, but there does sound like there was a crowd control issue. Next. This is the Andrew J. Barberi, the well-known Staten Island ferry. Next. And then just next. This would be heading into Staten Island Terminal. There was 2 people on the bridge. One was what's called the assistant captain, but there was a second person, the mate, sitting in a settee, not paying attention. He wasn't required to. The captain was on the opposite side of the wheelhouse. He was on the Manhattan side. So, in effect, you had one person operating this ferry. The green line into the terminal, the captain, who had been on numerous different medications, obviously had sleep apnea issues. He went into a microsleep. And when he was supposed to change course, he didn't. And he slammed right into these piers. And if you, next. And this is the result. You can see the slicing action and how the concrete just tore through it and took people and just dragged them from the forward to aft end. Now, in New York, this was 2, 3 in the afternoon. 2, 3 hours later, that ferry would have been packed. It wasn't heavily loaded with people, but a few hours later, you would have had hundreds and hundreds of fatalities. Next. This is 2 pictures of more damage. The one on the lower right was one of the female passengers was decapitated. Now, the ferry, you are not supposed to be standing on these stairwells when the ferry is coming in to dock. It was ignored, even though they would say announcements. Well, ignoring what you're told cost this lady her life. Okay, next. You can go next. As I said.
I just want to add one thing to that, is at the time of that accident, there was no, nobody with any maritime background was in the C-suite in terms of CEO, COO, et cetera. Nobody in senior management at the time of the Staten Island ferry had a maritime background. They created one. They got a COO, Captain Jim DeSimone, came into play. But that's why he got that job, is because they didn't have anybody in that place. Speaking to Nancy's point about a safety culture.
Yes, and yet the port captain went to jail. The assistant captain went to jail. And I believe the doctor lost his license. The assistant captain did not report the medications on his Coast Guard renewal. And the doctor signed off on it, even though this doctor was this assistant captain's personal doctor. And so basically he should have known, and he should have written down, when this assistant captain went to get his license renewed, of all the medications he was taking and the problems with it. But that's one of the things that they found with Coast Guard review of documents. They had, if I recall, it was a pediatrician reviewing licenses and medical information. She was not qualified to handle the seafarers and issues with drugs, and specific over-the-counter prescriptions had not been tagged or marked that seamen should not be taking it. This has had a major change for U.S. mariners now. I have a number of friends that are afraid when they go to renew their license, they will not be allowed to renew it because of sleep apnea is one of the big issues. But the second one is safety management systems. We talked about it in the international community. Domestic vessels, it is not required. And the NTSB has continued to send back to Coast Guard to require domestic ferries to implement the safety management system, and the Coast Guard has not done it for whatever reason to date. Okay, next. Oh, as discussed, I also was the Liberian investigator for the sinking of the MV Explorer. Next. It started out in Ushuaia, Argentina. You can click next. And then next went to the Falkland Islands. Next, South Georgia Island. It was supposed to go to the Antarctic Peninsula, Trinity Peninsula. Okay, next. Next. This is the area we're focusing on, the upper left. It's awful far down there. Next. The Explorer was originally intended to go to Base Esperanza. Instead, because of ice, and he realized he couldn't make it in time, the captain decided to, next, go to Penguin Island. Next. Problem is, this is what he ran into. Now, this was a ship that was built in the 60s, and it's under different grandfathered requirements because it was built in the 60s. So the plating may not have been what it should have been. They sliced into a wall of ice. It flooded the ship very quickly, and as I said, I could go into it. I have one copy of the report, sorry, but this is the report. It sliced in, it started flooding, it down flooded from the passenger cabins into the engine room, and it began to sink very quickly. Next. As they were deciding whether to abandon ship, they hit this iceberg, and that's what convinced the captain. He still wasn't convinced the ship was going to sink, but this said at least be safe and get him off. Next. Next, put all four up there. Oh, three, thank you. The captain had a Iridium satellite phone, and he was in contact with this vessel, the Nordnorg. Most of the captains down there knew each other. He made it quite clear to him this was trouble and get there as soon as you can. And it was a good thing this ship did get there as quick as it did. You can see up at the upper left, overloaded lifeboats. You can see Zodiacs, the rib boats. 3 out of the 4 lifeboats, they could not start their engines. So the Zodiacs had to tow the lifeboats. Next. I put all, I think it's 4 here again. You can see, once again, they were transferring in the lower left, transferring at sea between the Zodiacs and a lifeboat. You can see the upper left, the tow line of the lifeboat. You can see the upper right, starting to see a little chop. And then the lower right, that's the passengers getting onto the Nordnorg. Within 1 hour after they were all on board the Nordnorg, the seas, the winds kicked up 30, 35 knots. You would have had a lot of fatalities because those Zodiacs would not have been able to tow those lifeboats in that weather. You also had people that were showing the signs of hypothermia when they were brought onto the Nordnorg. An hour later, certainly wouldn't have made it any better for them. So next. Next. So this is where I want to get into the rescue coordination. The lower right picture, you can see that's just about before the Explorer completely capsizes and sinks. I called Coast Guard land area, and I heard some confusion. And no, I'm not trying to point fingers at anybody. Argentina, I called their rescue coordination. I didn't really get an idea. I called Chile. They seemed to have a very good idea of what was going on. I can even tell you his name. It was Lieutenant Commander Gracias, because I said, hey, that's an easy name to remember. And he goes, well, Ford's pretty easy too. But what really saved the day was the Iridium phone and the masters communicating with each other. However, if that not occurred, as I've said, within 1 hour, you may have had problems. So in rescue coordination, I think, and we're seeing it in Malaysia Air now. You may see it, I don't know, with the Korean ferry, but work with your neighbors. Be prepared, because I can assure you if something happens off your waters and the media shows up and the international community is watching and they start saying, well, there was turf battles, there was no cooperation. When it comes to saving life at sea, shouldn't be any borders. Next. So, next. This may sound very simplistic, but it's the way I would approach investigations. I think an investigation is like a jigsaw puzzle. You've got to find the pieces. You may get some of the pieces. Sometimes you have to find them and try to explain them. If you cannot explain a piece, then I think it's important in your reports you need to say, I can't fit this in, I don't know why. I've seen many investigations that they will not explain, and there's one in particular, it was called an Arctic Rose, a vessel that sank up in the Bering Sea. All died, all 15 fishermen died, and There were so many little pieces of that puzzle that in the final report by the Coast Guard, they just totally ignored it. And I thought if they could have done that investigation, that report correctly, it may have spurred Congress to increase some sort of oversight over domestic U.S. fishing boats, because it has been fairly lax, to put it mildly. Next. The only other thing is another very, very small document. This is the IMO Casualty Code, and it says you should be, flag states conducting an investigation, you should submit it to the IMO. And if the IMO reviews, they have a committee that meets, and they will review each country's reports. I will say I know there's a lot of countries that are just not submitting these reports, and I think when you talk about trying to get to the root cause of an accident and understanding, I see a lot of reports that I don't even think they get close to the root cause. The way I was taught at the NTSB, if you say this is the probable cause of how this accident happened, and you can say again why, and keep going down why, or how, or why, you haven't reached the probable cause, the root cause. So that's the big red question mark. Questions?
Good morning. Yes.
Yes, and then
Yes. The incidents that you just alluded to that should be submitted to the IMO. What type of what the value? If you have just a 40-footer sink in your water, is that substantially to report it to IMO? Have to be a certain amount of length passengers?
Any vessel that's subject to international requirements.
Okay.
So, for example, the Staten Island Ferry domestic vessel, that would not be submitted to the IMO.
Buenos días. Sí, gracias, capitán. Lo felicito por su... Bueno, mi nombre es Hugo Sergio Gómez Smith, vengo de México, soy profesor de seguridad marítima en una universidad. Todo lo que usted señala, las reglas y normas de la OMI, en gran parte son avaladas por agrupaciones privadas como lo que le llaman las asociaciones de clasificación. Bueno, ¿cómo procedió el Departamento de Estados Unidos en el caso de la ABS al detectarse que en el caso del Prestige tuvo gran influencia su omisión en la certificación por parte de la casa clasificadora? Y luego pues ya ve que en el juicio fue notable el debate sobre el caso de ABS, que pues hubo notables omisiones ahí. Quisiera ver qué pasó.
I'm sorry, I've read media reports on the Prestige, I've followed it some, I've never focused on it. If there's someone else that's familiar with it, I know what happened, but if there's someone else that's familiar with it, I'd be more than happy to give them the floor. I'm sorry, but I didn't deal that closely with the Prestige.
Pero la pregunta era en el sentido de que ABS es una casa clasificadora que tiene sede aquí en Estados Unidos, ¿no? Entonces, si la actuación de ABS que fue cuestionada internacionalmente, ¿hubo alguna reacción por parte del gobierno de Estados Unidos?
To my knowledge, no. You're talking about the classification societies that go on board the ships and audit their safety management system. They'll do all sorts of surveys. Was there any move by the United States government as a result of the Prestige? No, but I do know the IMO at the MSC and even at the legal committee that's meeting this week are dealing with the whole issue of harbor of refuge, that they were not allowed to come back in. So it's an issue. The problem is, what do you say to a country says, okay, you're off my coast, and you say, you must make them come in. Well, you tell them, well, you have to let that ship come in for refuge. Well, if I let that ship come in, it's going to spill thousands and thousands of gallons of oil. I don't want to let that ship in. So how do you enforce that? Is only my personal opinion. Does that ask? But
Well, I think you raise a really good question, Bob, and that's a question for this group. You know, the issue of harbor of safe refuge, you know, each person around this table is responsible for the safety of their own port. That includes the environmental safety. But when you look at the risk mitigation, when you look at the risk factor, if you've got a vessel out there full of, let's call it petroleum, and it is in distress, you know, we have an ethic within the maritime community of providing harbors of safe refuge. But each person around this room has the decision to whether they're going to allow that ship to come in and hopefully contain the problem. But certainly in the case of the Prestige, we saw, and the Erica, we saw that it expanded the problem. So, I mean, that's within the environmental community, that's an issue that we talk about. And we talk about it in the United States. This is the elephant in the room. People are unwilling to look at the issue of harbor of safe refuge. It's sort of like not in my backyard, but it is.
Yes, and that bring up one more point that I have seen, and it's so important to have because if not, the media will rip you apart. You must have a crisis management plan. You have one for your country. You have one for your neighboring countries where if you're both involved, you work together. Because once the media can start turning this into a sensational story, there's nothing they like more to do. You can see I'm not the greatest fan of media, so, but.
Well, speaking to Bob's point, and I am a fan of the media, sometimes I'm part of the media, but not today. You know, the exposure that you could have in the international arena for not having that crisis management plan is extraordinary. It could bring up, you know, ancient rivalries back from the 1500s if they wanted to. You don't need to have that happen. It's important to have the management safety procedures in place and your crisis media management in place, and the relationships that exist around this table. It means that, let's say, God forbid, 2 months from now, you have a problem and you're right next door to you, you will have the relationship where you can call each other and say, let's work collaboratively. That's one of the reasons that we're here today, is to work collaboratively.
Yeah, Robin Pitblado from DNVGL. Interesting talk, Bob. But the implication of what you're saying is that we have accidents and that leads to better regulation. Could you comment on perhaps more the European trend of having performance-based or goal-based regulations where you develop your own risk assessment in advance and implement your own safety measures, not waiting for the regulator to pass regulations?
I can say that it's a good goal, but at the librarian registry, I'd see it go back to many times the ship owner. That, you know, you can have all these codes, and you can't visit every ship in the world every day. And we would have ships that would go into a port, and you go, how did this ship escape port state control for so long? Because there's just not enough people out there. But to me, it's the ship owners that must be the ones willing, because we'd see ships that I could eat off the floor, they were so spotless, and others, as I've said, you just shake your head, you know, how can I make it? But yeah, performance-based goals is great, but there's got to be the dedication to the safety, to me.
Well, thank you very much, Bob, and I thank the panelists for their contributions to the presentation. Please, I would like to call Dr. Levinson back here just to present you with a small certificate of participation on YouTube.
Oh, thank you.
Bob. No, my pleasure. Thank you for coming. And no, thank you. Thank you. And again, I think that these morning speakers have done an excellent job in setting the scene and thinking about and again talking a little bit about, you know, I think that several issues have been mentioned, from forecasting and trying to prevent and planning ahead to policy, to regulation, to enforcement, and to safety culture, and all of these go to create a mix in which we can all be here. I think I'd like to, before we break for lunch, and lunch, by the way, outside here we've placed the lunch boxes for you all, and there's some sodas and tea and so forth. And I've been told that there's several options of the lunch boxes. So please read what's on them so that you may pick what tickles your fancy the best. But I think that with the initial setup and now this one with the accidents and lessons learned, I'm reminded, as we all are, and your comment about trying to forecast and Dr. Pilbaldo's risk management assistant. I think we can all try and imagine and plan for the worst, but until it happens, you really have no idea of what can happen. And that we've seen in all sorts of industries, car industry, the shipping industry, the cruise industry, the aerospace industry, and I'm reminded of that accident. I believe it was 1964 when the astronauts were all burnt by the fire in the Saturn rocket because of the hatch. Nobody thought about opening the hatch outwards instead of inwards, and so until it happens, they had all sorts of security procedures and guidelines, and then something that nobody expected happened, and once it happened, they planned for it, and I think that is very unfortunate that we have to go through an accident or a catastrophe, environmental or other, in order to learn not only mitigation strategies, but like I said at the beginning of this, preventive strategies, which is really what we're all about. So again, thank you for your participation. This is a networking lunch, so the idea is for all of us to mingle, and there are some seats at the end of the hallway. There's some tables and seats that might be available right now for you all. So I'll just expect you back here in 45 minutes. Thank you very much.